Late at night. The other woman sent me intimate photos of her with my husband. The caption read, "Your husband says you're like a dead fish." I didn't reply. Instead, I called the print shop straight away, rushed an order of 1,500 copies, and plastered them all over her entire residential apartment complex. The next day, she called me sobbing and begging, saying she knew she'd messed up. I laughed. Don't be in such a rush. This is just the appetizer. The next big gift is for both of you. The phone screen glowed faintly in the dark, the time reading 2 in the morning. ID just finalized the full plan for my next quarter's exhibition and was about to close my laptop. A message notification cut cleanly through the silence of the study. It was a photo. Ethan Carter, my husband of 5 years, tangled naked with a young woman. The background was the master bedroom of our marital home. The Italian imported gray bedsheets ID picked out myself, crumpled into a heap. The girl's face was angled straight at the camera, a taunting smile on her lips as she held up the phone for the selfie. Ethan's face was buried in the crook of her neck, his features unrecognizable, but the Patek Philippe on his wrist was the gift ID given him for his birthday the year before. Beneath the photo, a line of text followed immediately. "Your husband says you're like a dead fish." I stared at those 2 words for a long time. An icy coldness spread from my fingertips, up my arm, and straight to my heart. But there was no searing pain, no heart-wrenching breakdown like ID expected, only an eerie calm, as if the boot that had hung over my head for years had finally slammed down to the ground. So this was it. I took a screenshot of the photo and the taunting text without a single change in expression, my fingers moving across the screen as precisely as if I were handling a work document. The image was saved to an encrypted folder ID created long ago. The folder was named Final Chapter. I opened my laptop, and without a moment's hesitation, pulled up another file ID already prepared. The file was titled, Mia Parker. Inside was every last detail about her, more thorough than the resume she'd submitted for her job. Her home address down to the apartment number, her parents' workplaces and contact information, her college, even the coffee shop she stopped at every single day. ID dug all of this up a month prior. From the moment I noticed Ethan staying late at the office more and more often, when a woman's perfume that wasn't mine turned up in his car, ID known this day was coming. I didn't confront him, didn't pick a fight. Those were the most useless forms of emotional self-destruction. I just quietly, unobtrusively, gathered all the ammunition ID need for the inevitable war. I picked up my phone and dialed the number of Ray, the print shop owner ID worked with for years. A sleepy voice came through the line. "Ms. Hale, it's the middle of the night. Ray, I need a rush order." My voice was calmer than ID ever heard it. 1,500 full-color copies on A4 coated stock. Ready in 3 hours. I'll pay triple the standard rate. What's the content that you need it this bad? 1 photo, 1 line of text. I emailed him the screenshot. There was a beat of silence on the other end of the line. Then a quiet sigh. "Ms. Hale, are you sure you? Family business." "Ray," I cut him off, my voice completely devoid of emotion. "All right. I'll wake the crew and fire up the machines right now." I didn't sleep. I changed my clothes, got in my car, and drove to the print shop. The machines roared, the sharp smell of ink hanging heavy in the air. I watched as the explicit photo spilled out of the cold machinery, sheet after sheet. Ethan, the bedsheets ID picked out, the luxury watch ID gifted him, all of it had become the backdrop for his and another woman's taunt. Ray handed me a cigarette, which I declined politely. He clapped me on the shoulder and said nothing at all. By 4 in the morning, I was behind the wheel, my trunk loaded with 3 heavy cardboard boxes. ID hired 3 day laborers via a local task service app, and we met at the entrance to Mia Parker's apartment complex. "Stick these everywhere you can in this complex." I handed a stack of cash and a box of the flyers to them. The bulletin boards, the elevators, the gym equipment, And every single front door in every building. Ma'am. What is this exactly? One of the younger guys stared at the photo. Hesitating. I pulled another thick wad of cash out of my wallet and set it on top of the first. Just make sure it's thorough. With the promise of more money. All hesitation vanished. I didn't leave. I parked my car in the shadows across the street and watched as they moved like ghosts in the dark, spreading my work into every corner of the complex. The first faint light of dawn cut through the darkness. The complex started to stir. The retirees out for their morning walk were the first to spot the bright flyers, gathering around the bulletin boards, pointing and murmuring among themselves. Next came the security officers, rushing through the complex and tearing them down, but for every one they ripped off, they quickly found another. 1,500 copies. More than enough to let this scandal blow wide open with the rising sun. I watched the lights flick on in window after window, the figures peeking out to see what was happening, and let out a cold laugh. My phone finally rang. It was Mia Parker. The moment the call connected, I heard her shrill, hysterical sobs. The background a chaos of neighbors' shouts and gossip. Ms. Hale. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please. I'm begging you. Just let me off the hook. Her voice was shaking so hard she could barely get the words out. My parents will kill me if they find out. I'm gonna lose my job. Please. I let out a soft laugh, rolling down the car window to let the cool morning wind brush my face. My voice was as gentle as if I were comforting a frightened child. But the words I spoke were brutal. Don't be in such a rush. This is just the appetizer. The next big gift is for you. And your beloved Ethan. Ethan kicked open the front door while I was slowly polishing an 18th century French porcelain vase on the bookshelf. ID bought it at an auction 2 years prior. And had laughed at me for dropping hundreds of thousands on a fancy old pot. He didn't understand art. He only understood the vanity built from money and power. Nora, are you out of your fucking mind? He stormed up to me, his face livid, his eyes bloodshot, and slammed his phone down hard on the solid walnut coffee table in front of me. On the screen was the chat history from the apartment complex's HOA group chat, the explicit photos and vicious comments flooding the screen. Do you have any idea how badly this has ruined my reputation? He roared, flecks of spit flying toward my face. I could even smell the mix of tobacco, alcohol, and another woman's perfume on him. Of course, he didn't say a single word about his betrayal. He only cared about his reputation. I set down the soft cloth in my hand, picked up the vase ID polished to a warm, glossy sheen, and held it up to the light to examine it closely. Your reputation. I didn't even look up. My voice is flat as if I were discussing the weather. You built that with her in your bed. It has nothing to do with me. You. His chest heaved with rage, and he grabbed my wrist. His grip so tight I thought he'd crush my bones. You're gonna fix this right now. You're gonna tell everyone it was a misunderstanding. You're gonna apologize to Mia. He was still ordering me around. After 5 years of marriage, had grown accustomed to this high and mighty tone, to my obedience and restraint. I finally lifted my eyes and looked straight at him. There was none of the old warmth in my gaze, no adoration, not even anger or resentment, only a cold, unfamiliar scrutiny that made him flinch. Ethan Carter, what gives you the right to order me around? He froze. In 5 years, I'd never spoken to him with that tone, that look in my eyes. The rage in his face faltered, replaced by shock and disbelief. You ruined Mia. She's just a kid fresh out of college. She doesn't know any better. He was still defending his mistress, laying every last bit of the blame at my feet. He was always like this, selfish to the core. I laughed, a soft, quiet sound that made him loosen his grip on my wrist without even realizing it. Ruined her? No. I brushed my fingers over the red marks his grip had left on my wrist, and spoke slowly. In making her famous. Look, now the whole complex, and soon the whole company, knows she's your favorite woman. She should be thanking me. My words were a sharp, barbed knife, striking straight at his weakest point. His sanity snapped completely. He reared his hand back, ready to strike me across the face. I didn't flinch, but I took a step back, and as I did, my other hand lifted my phone. The camera pointed straight at him. On the screen was his hideous, contorted face. His arm raised mid-swing. Hit me. I stared at him calmly, my voice quiet, but every word crystal clear. Go on. Swing. I guarantee the cover of my next big gift will be a close-up of Ethan Carter beating his wife. His hand froze midair. It was inches from my cheek. I could even feel the wind from the movement. The blind rage in his eyes vanished the second he saw the camera, replaced by shock, and beneath it, unmistakable fear. He stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. And he was. To him, I'd always been nothing more than a gentle, boring accessory he could keep safely at home. A good wife to prop up his image and take care of his needs. It never crossed his mind that the dead fish head mocked would bare her teeth. Slowly, inch by inch, he lowered his hand. I watched the panic and chaos in his eyes, and knew that from this moment on, the game was completely out of his control. I was the one holding the pieces. He and his young, reckless mistress were nothing more than pawns that had spun out of control on my board. Mia Parker was let go from the company for severely damaging the company's reputation. It was a firing, plain and simple, just wrapped in polite language. In the span of a single morning, she'd gone from a promising investment banking intern to a joke everyone in the industry avoided like the plague. Ethan was drowning in chaos. He was stuck comforting a sobbing Mia on one side, and dealing with the gossip around the office and a dressing down from his superiors on the other. He probably thought my revenge ended there, that if he just rode out the storm, everything would go back to normal. He was naive. I waited a week, waited for him to catch his breath, for him to think the worst was over. Then I sent him the second big gift. It was a beautifully designed digital invitation, sent to his personal email. The subject line read, "Lines, a solo curatorial exhibition by Nora Hale." In the body of the email, I'd written only one line: "I've curated a new show, and I'd be honored if you'd attend. I've even extended a special invitation to Mr. Harrison from Harrison Capital Partners." Mr. Harrison was the key to a $10 billion project Ethan was desperate to land. If he pulled this project off, his position at the company would be unshakable. He couldn't not come. He called me, his voice tight with wariness and suspicion. "Nora, what the hell are you planning?" "Why would I be planning anything?" My voice was light, innocent. "I'm just a curator, putting on my own exhibition. You're my husband. Is it so wrong to ask you to witness this little milestone of mine?" Mr. Harrison is very interested in contemporary art. I'm just playing to his interests. He went silent. The promise of power and profit won out over his unease. He needed this project, needed Mr. Harrison's support to wash away the stain of the recent scandal. He agreed. On the opening night of the exhibition, Ethan showed up. He wore a crisp Armani suit, a flawless elite smile plastered on his face. Had even brought Mia Parker with him. The girl wore delicate, natural makeup and a white dress, trailing timidly at his side, trying desperately to play the part of a wronged but kind, sensible young woman, desperate to salvage her ruined image in front of Ethan's friends and clients. It was pathetic. The exhibition space was elegant and refined, with soft lighting, gentle music, and a room full of distinguished guests. Everyone who was anyone in the art, fashion, and finance worlds was there. Everything seemed perfectly normal, normal enough for Ethan to let his guard down completely. He held a glass of champagne and smoothly made his way over to Mr. Harrison of Harrison Capital Partners, the two of them chatting amicably. I watched that familiar, arrogant confidence creep back onto his face. He probably thought, in the end, I was still the Nora Hale who cared about appearances, who wouldn't embarrass him in front of all these people. At 8 o'clock that night, the exhibition officially began. As the curator, I stepped up onto the small, temporary stage. The spotlight fell on me, and I wore a simple black gown, my gaze sweeping calmly over the crowd, brushing over Ethan and MIA's faces for just a split second. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me here tonight for the opening of my first solo curatorial exhibition. Lines. Every single one of us navigates countless lines in our lives, in our careers, in our relationships, in our hearts. Some lines are bright and clear, uncrossable. Others are blurred, fragile, easy to step over without a second thought. Tonight, through art, we're here to explore that thin, fragile line between loyalty and betrayal, between humanity and greed. My voice carried through the speakers, clear to every single person in the room. The smile on Ethan's face faltered. Mr. Harrison watched me with keen interest. Now, it is my great pleasure to unveil the centerpiece of this exhibition. Its name is Betrayal. I turned and walked toward the piece in the center of the gallery, covered by a huge swathe of deep red velvet. Every light in the room focused on that spot, with every eye in the room on me. I reached out and pulled the velvet away with my own two hands. The moment the fabric fell, the room went completely, deathly silent. Then, a wave of sharp, shocked intakes of breath. It was an installation piece, a sculpture of a man, pieced together from countless shattered, discarded phone screens, cold and unyielding. In his arms, he held a sculpture of a woman, built from cheap, colorful crystal and clear plastic, catching the light to cast a gaudy, greedy glow. But that wasn't the deadliest part. The deadliest part was the hollowed-out heart of the man's sculpture. Embedded inside was a screen, playing a video on a loop. On that screen was the explicit, intimate photo of Ethan Carter and Mia Parker. ID edited the photo in a pop art style, the bright, bold colors making the image even more absurd and scathing. Beside the photo, in elegant, crisp typography, line after line of numbers and project titles were clearly marked. Project APR fee 30,001 Hermes Birkin. Project B travel expenses 50,000 romantic European getaway for two. Project C consulting fee 20,001 Ballon Bleu de Cartier watch. Line after line. Every single one was irrefutable proof that Ethan had embezzled company funds to splurge on Mia Parker. The project names and amounts were precise down to the cent. ID copied every single one of them from the hidden files on his study computer. He thought he'd covered his tracks perfectly. He never knew that the password to his computer was our wedding anniversary. The irony was almost poetic. The smile on Mr. Harrison's face vanished instantly, his expression turning dark as thunder. He glanced at the installation titled Betrayal, then slowly turned his head and looked at Ethan, who'd gone as white as a sheet beside him. The message in that look was impossible to miss. Ethan's body shook uncontrollably. The champagne flute in his hand clattered to the floor, shattering into 1,000 pieces, champagne splashing everywhere. He stared at me, his eyes filled with desperate, searing hatred. Mia, the second she saw what was on the screen, let out a short, shrill scream, then fainted dead away, her face paper white. The room erupted into chaos, and I, the architect of it all, still stood on the stage. I lifted my glass and smiled a perfect smile at the stunned guests in front of me. Art, as they say, imitates life. Cheers to this godforsaken life. Ethan's $10 billion project, unsurprisingly, fell apart completely the day after the exhibition closed. Mr. Harrison unilaterally announced that Harrison Capital Partners was terminating all partnership discussions. Not only that, the installation piece Betrayal spread like wildfire through the entire finance industry. Ethan's company, desperate to distance themselves from the scandal, immediately launched an internal audit and investigation department inquiry, suspending him pending the results. Had fallen from the top of the world, and it had only taken one night. ID expected his mother to come for me, but I hadn't expected her to come so fast. So furious. 3 days after the exhibition, The doorbell rang, loud and insistent, over and over again. I looked through the peephole and saw Mrs. Carter's face, twisted with rage, with Mr. Carter standing behind her, his expression just as grim. I opened the door. "You vicious woman. How dare you even open the door?" The second she stepped inside, she reared her hand back and slapped me hard across the face. A searing, burning pain spread from my cheek straight through my skull. My ears rang. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry or argue, like Shed expected me to. I just took the slap, calm and unflinching. What on earth did the Carter family ever do to you? For you to ruin Ethan like this, like a madwoman. He's your husband. She jabbed her finger in my face, her voice shrill and piercing. He made a mistake that every man ends up making. Couldn't you have just looked the other way? Did you have to air your dirty laundry in public and destroy his entire career? How can you be so cruel? Mr. Carter, standing behind her, spoke up, his face dark. "Nora, you've gone too far this time. Husband and wife settle their fights behind closed doors. How could you drag the family name through the mud like this and end Ethan's future? You will go to Ethan's company and explain this was a misunderstanding. And you will apologize to Mr. Harrison." They talked over each other, laying every last bit of the blame at my feet. In their eyes, their son's betrayal and embezzlement were a small mistake, but my retaliation, as his wife, was vicious and unforgivable. The double standard was laughable. I ignored the screaming woman in front of me and looked straight at Mr. Carter, who always styled himself as the head of the household. "Before you demand I apologize, I'd like to show you something." I walked into the living room and turned on the 85-inch big screen TV. I picked up the remote and pressed play. On the screen, a video started playing. The footage was a little shaky, clearly taken covertly. It was filmed in the bistro downstairs from our apartment building. In the video, Mrs. Carter, Ethan's mother, sat laughing and talking with a man significantly younger than Mr. Carter. They sat by the window, the man holding her hand tenderly, a girlish, shy smile on Mrs. Carter's face. I knew the man. He was a regular at the jazz club Mrs. Carter frequented. "Last month, you went out of town for your army buddy reunion. For 3 days, Dad." My voice was calm, like I was stating a fact that had nothing to do with me. "For those 3 days, Mom said she was going to the bistro to listen to jazz every single afternoon. This Mr. Dawson here looks quite a bit younger than you, doesn't he? He takes very good care of himself." The living room fell completely, deathly silent. The arrogance and rage on Mrs. Carter's face vanished the second she saw the video, replaced by nothing but stark white terror. Her lips trembled, but she couldn't get a single word out. The look on Mr. Carter's face was even more dramatic. It shifted from rage to shock to disbelieving suspicion, and finally settled on a livid, humiliated fury. He spun around sharply and stared daggers at his wife. "Nora, you investigated me." Mrs. Carter finally found her voice, but it shook like a leaf in the wind. "I didn't investigate you." I turned off the TV and walked slowly over to her, staring straight into her panicked eyes. "I just bought a membership at the bistro downstairs from my apartment. After all, I couldn't let you be the only one spending money on jazz nights. Now could I?" My words were a soft knife, cutting through the last of her facade. I turned back to the stunned Mr. Carter, my voice laced with just the right amount of sympathy. "You see, Dad, betrayal, it seems, runs in the family. So would you like to stay here and sort out your own family business first? Or would you rather keep standing here, defending your wonderful son?" A soft thud. Mrs. Carter's legs gave out, and she collapsed onto the couch. A grand, vicious trial meant to take me down had turned into a silent, humiliating family drama. I watched Mrs. Carter look more broken and panicked than I'd ever seen her, and felt not a single ounce of sympathy. Fight fire with fire. It felt unbelievably, deliciously good. The drama with the Carters ended with Mr. Carter dragging a catatonic Mrs. Carter out the door, his face thunderous. They never had the energy to bother me again. And things with Ethan were even worse than I'd imagined. Had not only been fired from the company, the internal investigation had uncovered even more evidence of embezzlement. The company, out of what little goodwill remained from his years there, hadn't called the police yet, but they'd demanded he pay back every last cent of the missing money within a strict deadline. Or they would pursue legal action. It was a sum he could never hope to pay back on his own. All his bank accounts were frozen, the properties in his name seized. Overnight, the high-flying investment banking prodigy had become a dead man walking, drowning in debt, with nowhere else to go. He finally came back to me. It was the first time he'd stepped foot in the house in 2 weeks of cold silence. He looked gaunt, his jaw covered in stubble, his expensive shirt wrinkled and unkempt. He didn't fly into a rage like he had last time. Head dropped his arrogant facade completely. He sat on the same couch where I'd waited for him to come home countless nights before. His voice hoarse. "Nora, we need to talk." He called me Nora, the nickname that had once made my heart flutter, now sounding nothing but pathetic and ironic. "We were married for 5 years. You don't have to ruin me completely. I know you hate me. I was wrong to you." He was playing the sentiment card now, trying to use our 5 years of marriage to stir up my pity. "I'll handle the company mess. But we need to split the assets first. This house, the money in our accounts. We split it 5,050. The car is yours. Does that work?" He thought I was just throwing a fit, just lashing out to get even. He thought that when the dust settled, I'd still sit down with him and split up what he called our marital assets. He thought he'd at least walk away with half my money to plug the holes in his debt. I looked at his tired, calculating face, and suddenly wanted to laugh. I walked into the study, pulled out a file I'd prepared long ago, and slid it across the table to him. "Fine. Let's talk about the assets." A flicker of hope crossed his face, and he grabbed the folder, flipping it open desperately. The next second, all the color drained from his face, leaving him whiter than paper. It was a prenuptial agreement, black and white, clear as day. "This is impossible. We never signed this." He shot to his feet, pointing at the document, his voice sharp and cracking with hysteria. "No, we didn't." I smiled, but the smile never reached my eyes. "Or rather, you refused to sign it." I watched his mouth fall open in shock, and kindly jogged his memory. "The day before we got our marriage license, I brought this agreement to you. Do you remember what you said? You said, 'Nora, we love each other. People who truly love each other don't need something like this to bind them, to insult what we have.' Then you stuffed it in the bottom of the bookshelf, and never spoke of it again." His face got paler and paler, clearly remembering the moment. "But what you don't know, Ethan, is this." I pulled another document out of the folder, a notarized affidavit, and set it on top of the agreement. "The day after you refused to sign it, the afternoon before we got our marriage license, I went to the notary public office alone, and had this declaration of my separate property notarized. The agreement was explicit. After marriage, all real estate, vehicles, and personal income and investment returns purchased in my name, Nora Hale, shall be my sole and separate property, and shall not constitute marital property." Ethan staggered, like all the strength had been drained from his body. I stood up, walked over to him, and looked down at him, settling the score for our 5 years of marital assets. "This house, the deed is in my parents' names. They bought it outright before we were married, gifted to me for my personal use. That Porsche, I bought it with my own savings before we were married. I still have the receipt. As for the money in our joint account," I pulled out my phone, opened the banking app, and turned the screen toward him. The account balance read a bright, glaring 0. "The second you embezzled the first chunk of company money to buy that 30,000 Birkin for your Ms. Parker." I transferred every last cent from our joint account to my mother's account. Not a penny left. I looked at his lifeless, desperate face, and pronounced his sentence, every word sharp and clear. Your so-called marital assets, Ethan, were a joke from the very beginning. All you have now is a mountain of debt you'll never pay off, and that undying true love of yours. With nothing left to his name, Ethan eventually moved into the tiny studio apartment Mia Parker was renting. That small, 400-square-foot space that had once been the backdrop for their love quickly turned into an arena where they tore each other apart, consumed by resentment. Mia, who'd lost her job, could no longer afford the lavish lifestyle she'd grown accustomed to. Her luxury bags and watches, once her pride and joy, had been flagged by the debt collection agencies, and she'd been ordered to cooperate with the investigation on suspicion of receiving stolen property. All her former glamour was gone, replaced by nothing but chaos and ruin. Ethan took every last bit of his failure and rage out on the woman who'd dragged him down into this mess. He forced Mia to beg her friends for money, to ask her parents for cash, to fill the endless black hole of his debt. If it wasn't for you, if you hadn't sent that stupid fucking photo to Taunt Nora, none of this would have happened. His furious roar echoed through the tiny apartment. This is all your fault, you stupid bitch. But Mia wasn't going to take it lying down. She screamed back through her sobs. Ethan, are you even a man? Blaming everything on a woman, who was the one in bed saying Nora was like a dead fish. It was you. You said she was boring, that she was cold, that you loved me. And look at you now. You got played by the woman you called a dead fish. You couldn't even beat her. You worthless loser. The screaming quickly turned to violence. From a video sent to me by a friend, from the apartment complex's HOA group chat, I watched the once polished investment banking elite pin Mia to the wall, his hands around her neck like a madman, and the once delicate, innocent young woman clawed at his face like a wild animal. Designer bags were ripped apart, expensive cosmetics shattered across the floor, mixed with their screams and curses. Their once perfect love had shown its ugliest, most rotten face when confronted with reality. The neighbors, fed up with the noise, eventually called the police. A video of the officers arriving to mediate was filmed by a bystander and posted online. The hashtag investment banker and mistress brawl over doomed affair even made it to the top of the local trending list. They'd gotten famous. In another ridiculous, tragic way, I scrolled through my phone, watching the video of them both disheveled, covered in scratches, screaming at each other, and took a slow sip of red wine. This dog-eat-dog fight was more entertaining than any exhibition I'd ever curated. Bad people don't need me to take them down. They'll drag each other straight to hell all on their own. I raised my glass of 1982 Lafite. Cheers to their forever. To their happily ever after. I hired a lawyer and sent the divorce papers to Ethan. Sent them straight to MIA's tiny studio apartment. The terms were brutal. To put it simply, it was 4 words. Walk away with nothing. Not only would he get not a single cent from me, he would also be solely responsible for all debts incurred during the marriage due to his personal misconduct. Ethan called me almost immediately. On the other end of the line, he sounded like a wild animal cornered, snarling with rage. Nora, this is beyond the pale. I'm already giving up everything. Why are you making me take on all the debt? You're trying to kill me. I'm telling you right now, I will never sign this. Well, drag this out for as long as it takes. Let's see who outlasts who. He was still threatening me with his pathetic, deadbeat logic. I didn't even bother arguing with him. I just cut him off calmly. Ethan, do you remember that dual set of contracts for tax evasion you signed 3 years ago? To land that downtown West real estate project. The line went completely deathly silent. I could hear his breathing suddenly turn ragged and heavy. That contract, with its massive sum, was the biggest, dirtiest secret of his career, if it ever came to light. He wouldn't just be facing debt, he'd be facing prison time. I don't have the original documents. I spoke slowly, giving him a false sense of relief. before driving the knife in deeper. But I do have a full copy of every single page. So hey, race your choice. You can sign the divorce papers right now. Clean and simple. And try to build a new life for yourself. Or I can send this, along with all your other art materials, straight to the IRS and the FBI Economic Crime Division. All I heard on the line was heavy, strained breathing. It went on for so long I thought he'd hung up. Until finally, his voice came through. Hoarse and broken. Nora, you're ruthless. Not even half as ruthless as you were to me, I said flatly. Before I hung up, something made me add one more line. Oh, and Ethan, did you really think I didn't know the code to that safe in your study? The one you never let me touch. It's my birthday. That copy of the contract. I took it from inside there. When you used my birthday as the code to lock away all your dirty secrets. You should have known this day was coming. I didn't wait to hear his reaction. I just hung up the phone. The next afternoon, I received a same-day courier package. Inside was the divorce agreement. On the line for the husband's signature, the name Ethan Carter was scrawled. The letters heavy and jagged, like he'd written them with every last bit of strength he had left. I stared at that signature and let out a long, slow breath. The war was finally over. The day I got my divorce decree. The weather was perfect. Sunlight streamed through the huge floor-to-ceiling windows, casting bright patches across the floor. The first thing I did was call the real estate agent I knew well and list the house that held 5 years of my marriage on the market. I priced it 10% below market value, with one non-negotiable condition: a fast close. The agent asked me why I was in such a rush. I said, out with the old, in with the new. While I waited for potential buyers to tour the house, I started a deep clean. I packed up every single thing that belonged to Ethan: his clothes, his shoes, his razor, his favorite books, his cigar collection, every item that bore his mark, without exception, went into boxes. 5 full boxes. In total. I didn't call a scrap collector. I didn't donate them. I carried every single box down to the dumpster by the apartment building myself, and threw them all away. The Patek Philippe ID given him, which ID found in the pocket of his suit jacket, went into the general waste bin too, along with its fancy box. When I was done, I walked back into the house and stood in the middle of the living room. On the wall still hung our huge wedding photo. In it, he was handsome and charming, and I was smiling bright, happy. Once ID thought that was what happiness looked like. I climbed up on a step stool and took that heavy frame down myself. Not a single moment of hesitation, not a single flicker of regret. I set it face down and dropped it hard into the trash bin in the hallway. The sound of the glass shattering was sharp and sweet. The agent brought the first set of potential buyers very quickly. A young, clearly in love couple. The girl had her arm linked through the boy's, her eyes bright as she looked around the beautifully decorated, sunlit house, full of dreams for the future. She looked at me curiously and asked, "Ma'am, this house is so beautiful, and it's in perfect condition. Why are you selling it?" I looked at that unspoiled, happy smile on her face and smiled back. "Because I want to move somewhere bigger, somewhere with a better view." The house sold very quickly to that same young couple. The second I signed the contract and got the full payment, I felt no sadness at all, only a freedom I'd never known before. I took a long vacation without telling a single soul. I booked a one-way ticket to Iceland. I wanted to see the northern lights, to wash away every last bit of the dust and darkness of the past, with the brightest, purest light in the world. But right before I left for the airport, in the parking garage below my apartment building, I was stopped by someone I never expected to see again. It was Mia Parker. In just a few months, she looked like a completely different person. Her face was gaunt, her eyes sunken, the once pristine Chanel jacket she wore dirty and worn. There was no trace of the arrogance and smugness she'd had when she sent me that photo, only bitter, burning resentment in her eyes. "Nora, you won. Are you happy now?" She stepped in front of my car, her voice hoarse, accusing me. I stared at her, and didn't even bother to speak. Why did you do this to him? You could have just come after me. He loved you for years, even if he made a mistake. You didn't have to ruin his entire life. She was still defending Ethan, still standing up for the man who'd used her as a punching bag and a scapegoat for all his mistakes. I looked at her, so stubbornly blind, and thought it was equal parts funny and tragic. Aren't you two supposed to be madly in love? I finally spoke, my voice flat. If it's true love, you should stand by each other, through thick and thin. He has nothing left. No job, no money, nowhere to live. You ruined his life. She screamed at me, like I was the monster here. He ruined his own life. Mia. And you helped him do it. I didn't want to argue with her any longer. I walked around her, and reached for the car door. But she lunged forward, and grabbed the hem of my coat. This time, her tone had changed, her facade crumbling. Her eyes filled with desperate pleading. Ms. Hale Nora, you have everything now. You have money. You have your career, you're so successful. And I have nothing. Can you just give me something? Even just severance pay. Please. Severance pay. I laughed out loud at the sheer audacity of it. I shook her hand off my coat, and pulled a $100 bill out of my wallet. I didn't hand it to her. I just let it go, letting the red bill float gently down to the ground, right by her scuffed, dirty shoes. That's the last bit of dignity I can give you. I didn't look at the shock and humiliation on her face. I pulled open the car door, and got in. I started the engine, and drove away. In the rearview mirror, I watched her sink to her knees on the cold concrete of the parking garage, and pick up the bill. She buried her face in her knees, her shoulders shaking violently, sobbing like the pathetic joke she was. The northern lights in Iceland were more magnificent and breathtaking than I could have ever imagined. Green ribbons of light danced and shifted across the deep blue night sky, like a silent symphony from the universe. I stayed there for a full month, until the last bit of darkness in my heart had been washed away by that pure, unspoiled sky. When I came back to the States, I used the money from selling the house to open my own art studio. I no longer worked for any gallery or institution. I only put on the exhibitions I wanted to put on, curated the art I believed in. My career took off almost immediately. 6 months later, my art studio held its opening gala. The room was filled with the biggest names in the industry. I wore a custom couture gown from a Lebanese designer, a glass of champagne in my hand, moving effortlessly through the crowd of beautifully dressed guests, accepting everyone's congratulations and praise. It was all perfect, like a dream. When I went to grab another glass of champagne, a hand holding a silver tray trembled slightly in front of me. The champagne flutes on the tray clinked softly. I looked up, following the hand, and met a pair of familiar eyes. Eyes I'd once loved, and once hated. It was Ethan Carter. He wore a cheap, ill-fitting waiter's uniform, his hair messy, his eyes darting away from mine. The eyes that had once held nothing but arrogant disdain now held only shame and humiliation. We stared at each other for 3 seconds. The whole world seemed to fall silent. I could see the shock, the shame, and a flash of complicated, unmistakable regret in his eyes. He probably never thought he'd see me again like this, in this place, in this way. I hadn't thought so either, but I felt nothing. No satisfaction from my revenge. No smug superiority. Not even a single ounce of pity. He was just a stranger, a waiter holding a tray. I said nothing at all. I just gave him a polite, distant nod, exactly like I would to any other member of staff helping me at an event. Then I took a glass of champagne from his trembling tray, turned, and walked away. I heard the sound of glass shattering behind me, but I didn't look back. I walked over to my business partner, raised my glass to him, and picked up our conversation about the next exhibition season right where we'd left off. Indifference is the ultimate form of contempt. His existence, his downfall, his regret, none of it had anything to do with me anymore. We were from 2 different worlds now. and never the twain shall meet. 3 nights after the gala, late at night, I received a long text from an unknown number. I knew it was him. Had probably begged our old mutual friends for my new number. Tracked it down through every connection he had left. Nora. I'm sorry. That was the first line of the text. An apology that had come far too late. When I saw you at the gala the other night, I finally understood what I lost. You stood there, like you were glowing. And I was just hiding in the shadows. I was wrong. So horribly wrong. I never should have betrayed you. Never should have hurt you. Never should have used those words to humiliate you. You were right. I'm the one who ruined my own life. I had no right to call you a dead fish. You're the most alive. The most vibrant. The most brilliant woman I've ever known. I never deserved you. If I could go back in time. The text was long, filled with belated regret and cheap, self-pitying sentiment. I leaned back against the headboard of my bed, the warm lamplight glowing around me, and read every single word. Calm and unfeeling. I felt nothing, not even annoyance. That apology might have meant something. If it had come that night I received the photo. That taunt. In the early hours of the morning. But now, it was less than junk mail. I held down on the text. And a few options popped up on the screen. I hit delete, without a single moment of hesitation. Then I blocked the number. Some apologies come too late, and will never deserve forgiveness. Some people, once they're gone, deserve to be erased from your life forever.